She thought she had escaped him. 29-year-old Morgan Fox blocked her obsessed coworker on every platform, reported him to Human Resources, and made it crystal clear she wanted nothing to do with him. But on a rainy October morning in 2020, as Morgan prepared to leave for her early shift at FedEx, he was waiting in the darkness outside her home. 2 shots rang out in the pre-dawn hours. When her boyfriend discovered her body slumped in her SUV just after 6 a.m., investigators faced a chilling question. Who would execute a young mother in her own driveway? The answer would emerge from thousands of secretly recorded photos, deleted text messages, and traffic camera footage that painted a disturbing portrait of obsession turned deadly. This is the story of Morgan Ashlye Fox and how digital footprints brought her killer to justice. Before we dive into this investigation, if you're fascinated by cases where technology plays a crucial role in solving crimes, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode from Buried Secret Media. And if you appreciate the detailed research that goes into these videos, a like really helps us continue bringing you these important stories. Morgan Ashlye Fox had worked hard to create the life she wanted. At 29 years old, she had risen through the ranks at FedEx Ground's North Canton distribution facility in Ohio to become an operations manager. It was a demanding position that required dedication, leadership, and early hours, but Morgan took pride in her work. She lived on Fraser Avenue Northwest in Plain Township, Stark County, with her boyfriend Jason Scarnecchia. They had been together for about a year by October 2020, and their relationship was stable and loving. But the true center of Morgan's universe was her daughter, Amelia. The 8-year-old girl was everything to Morgan. Friends and family would later describe Morgan as someone whose entire world revolved around being a mother. She was generous, loved animals, and would do absolutely anything to ensure her daughter had every opportunity in life. Morgan was one of 13 children born to Cindy Pappas and Robert Fox, and she maintained close relationships with her large extended family, including her stepsisters Megan Barrett and Tessa McClelland. Morgan's work schedule was grueling by most standards. Because of her operations manager role at FedEx, she typically woke around 1 o'clock in the morning, left her home by 2:15 a.m., and started her shift at 3 a.m. This schedule gave her just enough time to arrive at the facility and prepare for the day's operations. On nights when she worked these early shifts, Morgan would drop Amelia off at her mother Cindy's house so her daughter could sleep peacefully while Morgan worked through the night. The evening of October 27, 2020, seemed like any other night. Morgan dropped Amelia off at her grandmother's house as usual, then returned home. She had dinner with Jason and went to bed around 9 p.m., knowing she had to wake in just a few hours. At approximately 1:30 in the morning on October 28th, Morgan spoke with her mother by phone while getting ready for work. Cindy Pappas would later testify in court that her daughter sounded completely normal, even happy. Morgan was in great spirits, looking forward to her day. It was the last time Cindy would ever hear her daughter's voice. Jason Scarnecchia woke up around 6 o'clock that morning. Something felt wrong immediately. Morgan's SUV was still parked in the driveway. She should have been at work for 3 hours by now. Concerned, Jason got up and went outside to check on her. What he found would shatter his world forever. Morgan was slumped in the driver's seat of her vehicle. The car door was open. There was a wound on her head. Jason immediately called 911, his voice breaking with panic and grief. He told the dispatcher he was pretty sure his girlfriend was dead. When Stark County Sheriff's deputies arrived at the scene, it was raining, an unfortunate condition that threatened to wash away crucial evidence. Major C.J. Stantz confirmed what Jason had feared. This was a homicide. Morgan appeared to be partially in and out of the vehicle, her feet still outside as if she had been in the process of climbing into the driver's seat when she was attacked. Her purse remained with her. There was cash inside the vehicle. Nothing had been stolen. This wasn't a robbery. When officers noticed a bullet hole in the passenger side door, the horrifying truth became clear. Morgan had been shot. Nearby, on the property next door, investigators found fresh tire tracks pressed into the grass and mud. There was mud smeared on a white vinyl fence, suggesting a vehicle had peeled out in a hurry. At the time, it was unclear whether these signs were connected to the murder, but they would later prove to be critical evidence. When investigators carefully removed Morgan's body from the vehicle, they discovered she had been shot twice. One bullet wound was behind her left ear. Another was at the top of her head. The positioning of the wounds told a chilling story. Someone had approached Morgan as she was getting into her car and shot her at close range from behind. This was an execution. Scattered on the wet ground near her vehicle, investigators found several items, including Morgan's cell phone. In modern criminal investigations, phones often hold the key to solving cases, and detectives seized it as evidence, hoping the rain hadn't damaged it beyond recovery. They had no idea just how crucial that phone would become. Investigators immediately began interviewing people close to Morgan to understand who might want to harm her. They spoke with her mother, Cindy Pappas, who had been one of the last people to speak with Morgan. Detectives asked whether Morgan had any known enemies, if her relationship with her boyfriend was stable, or if anyone might have wanted to hurt her. Cindy explained that while Morgan and Jason had experienced some issues in the past, like any couple, things had recently been going very smoothly. But then Cindy mentioned something that caught the investigators' attention. Morgan had been having problems at work. Specifically, she had encountered issues with some male coworkers. The details of what happened would prove to be the key to understanding Morgan's murder. In cases like this, investigators typically begin by examining the people closest to the victim. Because of this standard procedure, police interviewed Jason Scarnecchia extensively. He had discovered the body and made the 911 call, which meant he had to be thoroughly investigated and either cleared or considered a suspect. Jason told detectives that he and Morgan had been living together for about a year. He wasn't Amelia's biological father, but he cared deeply for both Morgan and her daughter. He said their relationship was good, stable, and loving. Jason explained Morgan's unusual work schedule to investigators. She would typically wake around 1 a.m. and leave the house shortly after 2 a.m. That schedule gave her enough time to arrive at the FedEx facility and be ready to start her shift at 3 a.m. He told detectives that he had woken up around 6 that morning and noticed her car was still in the driveway, which immediately struck him as unusual and concerning. He had gone outside to check and found Morgan unresponsive. He called 911 right away. During questioning, Jason appeared visibly upset and emotional. He seemed genuinely devastated by Morgan's death and expressed a sincere willingness to cooperate fully with the investigation. Detectives noted that he didn't appear to be hiding anything during the interview. His answers were consistent, his timeline checked out, and his emotional responses seemed authentic. To be thorough, investigators swabbed Jason's hands for gunshot residue. The test came back negative. Jason Scarnecchia was quickly cleared as a suspect. But Jason provided investigators with a crucial piece of information. He told them that Morgan had recently had a serious conflict with some male coworkers at FedEx. According to Jason, these coworkers had taken Morgan's phone from her desk when she wasn't looking. When she returned to the office, she reportedly caught them going through her personal photos and data. Morgan was furious. She confronted them, and an argument broke out. This incident, Jason said, had deeply upset Morgan. With limited physical evidence at the crime scene due to the rain, detectives knew they needed to find other sources of information. They canvassed the neighborhood, going door to door in search of security cameras. They discovered several homes had discreetly placed peephole cameras and doorbell cameras. At first, this seemed like their best hope for finding footage of the killer. Unfortunately, that hope was short-lived. The footage they retrieved revealed nothing suspicious. No vehicles, no suspicious persons, nothing that could help them identify who had murdered Morgan Fox. However, there was one fortunate break. Morgan's phone had survived the rain and was still functional. When forensic specialists examined the device, they found that the last person Morgan had texted was her boyfriend, Jason. The detectives carefully reviewed all of Morgan's text messages and found that her relationship with Jason appeared to be exactly as he had described: stable, loving, and free of conflict. But then they found the messages about the workplace incident. On October 8, 2020, exactly 20 days before her murder, Morgan had texted Jason about what happened at work that day. She explained that some coworkers had taken her phone when she left it unattended and accessed its contents. Morgan believed they had seen inappropriate photos stored on her device. She was humiliated, angry, and felt deeply violated. After reading these messages, investigators felt confident that Jason had been completely honest with them. But they now had a new line of investigation to pursue. To follow up on the workplace issues, investigators visited Morgan's employer. They had received information from two separate sources suggesting she had serious conflicts with some colleagues. When they spoke with her supervisor at FedEx, the supervisor confirmed that the phone incident had indeed occurred and involved 3 male employees. When police reviewed the personnel files of those 3 workers, they discovered something deeply troubling. Out of the 3 employees under scrutiny, detectives quickly ruled out 2 as unlikely suspects based on their backgrounds and alibis. However, the 3rd individual raised serious red flags. This employee was a 29-year-old man named Jason McDermitt. His personnel file contained a warning that should have been a major red flag. McDermitt had previously received a formal warning for harassing a different female coworker. According to the complaint, his behavior toward this woman had persisted even after she explicitly asked him to stop. The complaint described a friendship that had turned obsessive. Investigators now had a suspect with a documented history of obsessive behavior toward female coworkers who had been involved in violating Morgan's privacy just 20 days before her murder. They needed to determine his movements during the critical window when Morgan was killed. Given that Morgan typically left home around 2 a.m. to start her shift at 3 a.m., investigators concluded the crime must have taken place between approximately 1:30 and 2:30 in the morning, since Morgan never made it out of her driveway. To determine Jason McDermitt's whereabouts during this window, police requested surveillance footage from the FedEx workplace. The video revealed something immediately suspicious. McDermitt didn't arrive at work until 2:58 a.m. that morning. He was nearly 30 minutes late, which was unusual for him. Even more interesting, he entered the building through the back door rather than the main entrance. Because of this timing, Jason McDermitt became the primary suspect. He wasn't at work during the precise window when the crime occurred. He had the opportunity. According to his supervisor, McDermitt had behaved normally after his shift ended at approximately 10 a.m. that day. There was no indication he was under stress or behaving strangely. FedEx issued a public statement expressing sympathy for Morgan's family and stating they were fully cooperating with the police investigation. As investigators dug deeper, they interviewed more of Morgan's coworkers. One witness revealed something crucial. Morgan and McDermitt had once been friends. In fact, they had been close enough that Morgan trusted him. But at some point, that friendship had evolved into something Morgan didn't want. The witness explained that Morgan had ended whatever relationship they had, which reportedly left McDermitt deeply upset and depressed. In response, McDermitt had written Morgan a letter of apology and received an informal workplace warning. He was cautioned that any further misconduct would lead to his termination. Meanwhile, Morgan's family was struggling with grief and uncertainty over who might be responsible for her death. Her sister took to social media, making desperate pleas for information. She urged anyone who might have been in the area that morning to come forward and contact the police. Someone might have been nearby and seen or heard something important. Any detail, no matter how small, could help solve the case and bring justice for Morgan. At the same time, 8-year-old Amelia had to face the heartbreaking reality that her mother was never coming home. The little girl who had been the center of Morgan's world now had to navigate life without her. Detectives continued investigating Morgan's coworkers, reviewing her phone again and again to check for any messages that might reveal if someone had misinterpreted her friendship or accessed her private information without permission. During their exhaustive search, they discovered letters and messages written by Jason McDermitt that painted a disturbing picture. About a year before Morgan's death, investigators learned Jason McDermitt had brought Morgan breakfast at work. He had also written her notes expressing that he would always be there for her, that she could count on him, that he cared deeply about her well-being. Morgan had responded with gratitude, telling him she appreciated the kind gesture. The text messages and notes suggested that Morgan saw Jason as simply a friend and coworker, while Jason clearly hoped for something much deeper and more romantic. Then came October 8, 2020. On that day, Jason McDermitt and some of Morgan's other coworkers went through her phone without permission. Security footage from the FedEx facility captured McDermitt hiding behind boxes to conceal himself while he scrolled through Morgan's private photos. Investigators later learned that he had not just looked at the photos, but had actually uploaded all of Morgan's personal images, videos, and applications to his own device. Even worse, he had shared some of Morgan's intimate photographs with other male coworkers. When Morgan discovered what had happened, she was devastated and furious. Her trust had been completely violated by someone she considered a friend. She sent McDermitt harsh messages expressing her anger and her loss of trust in him. She told him in no uncertain terms that she never wanted to speak to him again. She blocked him on every social media platform. She cut him out of her life completely. The following day, Morgan called Jason McDermitt to make absolutely sure he understood that their friendship was over. Although McDermitt apologized during that call for what had happened, Morgan remained cold and distant. She wanted nothing to do with him. Morgan also filed a formal complaint with FedEx Human Resources, explaining what had happened and expressing that she felt uncomfortable at work because of McDermitt's behavior. Investigators discovered that Morgan and McDermitt hadn't spoken since October 24th, just 4 days before her murder. On that day, McDermitt had sent Morgan a seemingly innocent message asking how things were going in Columbus. Morgan responded, surprised and concerned, "How do you know that?" She was in Columbus with her family at the time, visiting relatives, and she was disturbed that McDermitt seemed to know her location. He claimed she had told him herself, but Morgan knew that wasn't true. After reviewing all of Morgan's messages, police confirmed that Morgan had never mentioned to McDermitt that she was going to Columbus. This suggested something chilling. McDermitt might have been following her or tracking her movements somehow. Suspecting that Jason McDermitt might have been stalking Morgan, police brought him in for questioning. To his credit, McDermitt agreed to answer all their questions without demanding a lawyer be present. When investigators asked if he and Morgan had ever been romantically involved, McDermitt denied it. He said she was just a friend he happened to like. At one point during the interview, he admitted he thought he might have had romantic feelings for her, but after some reflection, he had concluded it wasn't really love. Police then asked if he knew anyone who might want to harm Morgan. McDermitt responded that he didn't know anyone who would do such a terrible thing. When investigators directly confronted him with the most important question, asking, "Did you shoot Morgan Fox?" McDermitt firmly denied any involvement in her death. Interestingly, McDermitt consented to let investigators search his cell phone. This decision would prove to be a massive mistake on his part, though he likely believed his deleted data was gone forever. The police hoped to uncover evidence on McDermitt's phone that would either support or challenge his statement. Their primary focus was tracking where his phone had been on the night Morgan was murdered. If his phone's location data showed he was near Morgan's home during the time of the attack, it would make him the prime suspect. If the data showed he was somewhere else, it might clear him. When investigators reviewed the GPS location data, they saw that McDermitt's phone had remained near his residence on Whipple Avenue from 4 p.m. on October 27th until 2:48 a.m. on October 28th, when the phone apparently left for work. On the surface, this suggested McDermitt had stayed at home during the murder, but experienced investigators knew that location data only shows where a phone is located, not where the phone's owner is located. Someone who wanted to create an alibi could simply leave their phone at home while they committed a crime elsewhere. The phone data wasn't clearing McDermitt. If anything, it suggested he might have been smart enough to create a false digital trail. The crime lab took possession of McDermitt's phone to perform a deep forensic extraction of all data, including anything he had deleted. While waiting for those results, investigators received an anonymous tip from an unknown caller who warned them to investigate a man named Mark, described as another individual Morgan might have been involved with. The police summoned Mark for questioning and examined his phone as well. They found nothing relevant to the case. After verifying Mark's alibi for the night of the murder, police removed him from the list of suspects. As the investigation progressed, all suspects were systematically ruled out except for 2 people: Morgan's boyfriend Jason Scarnecchia and her co-worker Jason McDermitt. However, McDermitt raised far more suspicion, so police decided to focus their primary attention on him. They located him at his parents' house and asked him to come in for additional questioning. When officers arrived at the McDermitt family home, they noticed something odd. Jason McDermitt's car, a blue Ford Focus, had just been washed and was parked in the garage. This struck investigators as strange because it had rained heavily the previous day and the roads were still wet and muddy. Why would someone feel the need to wash their car when the roads were still in such poor condition that the vehicle would just get dirty again? Investigators soon learned something interesting. Someone had informed them that Jason McDermitt had visited a gas station and a car wash immediately after his work shift ended on October 28th, just hours after Morgan's murder. The police pulled surveillance footage from the gas station and reviewed what McDermitt had done. The footage showed McDermitt arriving at the car wash after his shift. His behavior was unusual, to say the least. He ran his Ford Focus through the automated car wash, paying special attention to thoroughly cleaning the rear wheel wells. But here's what made investigators take notice. After completing one full wash cycle that included specific attention to the wheel wells, McDermitt decided to clean that same area again. He ran the chassis wash a second time, focusing once more on the wheels and undercarriage. This struck investigators as highly unusual behavior, especially considering the roads were still wet from rain. Following the repeated car wash, McDermitt drove past the gas station's convenience store without going inside. Instead, he pulled over to the side, got out of his car, and carefully inspected his Ford Focus, walking all the way around the vehicle as if checking to make sure it was completely clean. Forensic experts later confirmed something crucial. The tire tracks found at the crime scene, pressed into the grass and mud at the neighbor's property, matched the specifications of the tires on McDermitt's Ford Focus. The width, the tread pattern, the wheelbase dimensions, all of it matched. This explained why McDermitt had washed the tires so meticulously. He was trying to remove any mud or grass that might link his vehicle to the crime scene. As police questioned people who knew Jason McDermitt, a disturbing pattern emerged. Everyone they spoke with was aware of the phone incident involving Morgan. Everyone knew that after Morgan cut ties with him following that violation of her privacy, McDermitt had become deeply depressed and upset. Coworkers, friends, even family members agreed that McDermitt's focus on trying to win Morgan back had changed his behavior noticeably. He became withdrawn, stopped taking care of himself, couldn't sleep, barely ate. He talked about Morgan constantly. Then investigators discovered something that made them deeply suspicious of McDermitt's motives. Shortly after Morgan's death, McDermitt had attended a vigil that was held near her home. Friends and family had gathered to honor Morgan's memory and demand justice. McDermitt not only attended this vigil but also posted a photo from the event on his social media accounts. The post was accompanied by a heartfelt message and included the hashtag Justice for Morgan. In his Facebook post, McDermitt had written an emotional tribute. "I wish I had time to list all the ways you have changed my life. The list would be so long we'd never reach the end. Whenever I had a bad day, I knew I could always come to you as a friend. It feels so strange not being able to talk to you, and this has left a huge hole in my heart. But I know you will always be watching over us, your family, your friends, and your daughter. You changed all of our lives for the better, and we will never forget you." To Morgan's family members reading this post, knowing what they knew about McDermitt's obsessive behavior, the message felt disturbing rather than touching. It seemed like McDermitt was inserting himself into their grief, trying to position himself as someone who had been important in Morgan's life, when in reality, she had wanted nothing to do with him. When the forensic computer specialists finished their deep analysis of McDermitt's phone, they recovered extensive data, including thousands of files that McDermitt had intentionally deleted, believing they were gone forever. What they found was shocking and deeply disturbing. McDermitt's internet browsing history showed that he regularly visited adult video websites. This alone wouldn't be unusual or incriminating, but the volume and frequency suggested a significant preoccupation. More concerning were his communications with other people. In conversations with friends and acquaintances, McDermitt frequently brought up Morgan Fox. He talked about her constantly. He shared many photos of her with other people. When investigators examined the photos on McDermitt's phone, they were stunned. His device was filled with pictures of Morgan, but these weren't photos she had sent him or photos they had taken together. These were secret photographs that McDermitt had taken without Morgan's knowledge or consent. There were more than 70 secret photographs and videos of Morgan that she had no idea existed. The forensic analysis showed that starting in the summer of 2020, several months before the murder, McDermitt had begun secretly recording Morgan on his phone while they were at work. The videos showed him filming her as she went about her duties at the FedEx facility, completely unaware she was being recorded. In one particularly disturbing video, McDermitt had gone to Morgan's home for what she thought was a friendly visit. The video was recorded in Morgan's own kitchen. It showed McDermitt sitting at her kitchen table, filming Morgan as she washed dishes, chatting casually, having no idea that the person she considered a friend was secretly recording her every move. The videos and photos clearly demonstrated that Morgan had absolutely no idea she was being watched and recorded. McDermitt had also taken screenshots of Morgan's Snapchat posts using a special application designed to bypass Snapchat's screenshot notification feature, so Morgan never knew he was saving her photos. But perhaps most disturbing of all were the Skype conversations that investigators uncovered. McDermitt had been communicating extensively with another user on Skype under the screen name JustMonica69. In these conversations, McDermitt engaged in elaborate role-playing scenarios. He posed as a woman involved in a fictitious lesbian relationship. And critically, he wrote detailed sexual fantasy stories that featured Morgan Fox as a central character. These Skype conversations occurred multiple times daily from June 2020, just 4 months before the murder, continuing right up until Morgan's death. McDermitt had incorporated Morgan's Snapchat photos and has secretly taken images into these exchanges, sharing them with this other person as part of his fantasy scenarios involving Morgan. Jason McDermitt was clearly obsessed with Morgan Fox in a way that went far beyond normal friendship or even unrequited romantic interest. This was a dangerous, all-consuming fixation. When Morgan discovered what McDermitt had done with her phone on October 8th and cut him out of her life, it's possible that McDermitt realized he could never be with her the way he wanted. And if he couldn't have her, perhaps he decided that no one else should either. While the police already had a strong sense of who Jason McDermitt was and what he was capable of, they still needed to definitively link him to the crime scene. Physical evidence from the crime scene was limited due to the rain, but investigators had one more avenue to explore: traffic cameras. The city of North Canton had installed traffic cameras at various intersections to monitor traffic flow and catch speeding violations. These cameras ran continuously, recording every vehicle that passed through their view. Investigators pulled footage from every camera in the area around Morgan's home for the early morning hours of October 28th. What they discovered was the breakthrough they needed. A traffic camera captured footage of a blue Ford Focus with a distinctively bent front license plate traveling toward Morgan's neighborhood at 1:38 a.m. The vehicle was recorded heading from Glenwood to South Main Street to Schneider Street, which led directly to Fraser Avenue where Morgan lived. At 2:17 a.m., approximately 40 minutes after Morgan was murdered, the same Ford Focus was captured on camera heading away from the area, back toward the direction of McDermitt's apartment and, eventually, toward the FedEx facility where he worked. When investigators seized Jason McDermitt's Ford Focus and examined it, they confirmed that the front license plate was indeed bent in exactly the same distinctive way shown in the surveillance footage. The car in the video was undoubtedly McDermitt's vehicle. Additional evidence continued to build the case against McDermitt. A specially trained canine unit was brought in to search for evidence of firearms. The explosives detection dog, named Milo, was trained to alert the presence of gunshot residue. When Milo was brought to McDermitt's Ford Focus, the dog immediately alerted to gunshot residue on the driver's seat and floor of the vehicle. To ensure this wasn't a false positive, investigators also had Milo search Morgan's home, her boyfriend's car, and the entire property perimeter around the crime scene. The dog found nothing in any of those locations. The only place Milo alerted to the presence of gunshot residue was inside Jason McDermitt's Ford Focus. Ballistics analysis provided additional pieces of the puzzle. 3 severely deformed .22 caliber bullet fragments were recovered from Morgan's head and hair during the autopsy. 1 additional bullet was found embedded in the interior passenger door of her vehicle. All of the bullets were luballoy-coated lead with right twist rifling and 6 lands and grooves. These characteristics were consistent with ammunition fired from a revolver rather than a semi-automatic pistol. This detail explained why no shell casings were found at the crime scene. Unlike semi-automatic firearms that eject spent casings, revolvers retain the empty casings inside the cylinder. The killer had used a revolver specifically because it wouldn't leave that evidence behind. Investigators learned that McDermitt's father owned several firearms, which were stored in a gun safe at the family home. McDermitt had access to his parents' house and had been there as recently as 5 days before Morgan's murder. Police obtained permission to test 4 .22 caliber firearms from the gun safe: a Ruger, a Chiappa firearms model, a Beretta, and a Heritage Rough Rider revolver. The Canonstar County Crime Lab conducted ballistics testing on all 4 weapons. The Ruger, Chiappa, and Beretta were definitively excluded as the murder weapon. However, the Heritage Rough Rider revolver could not be excluded. While the lab couldn't conclusively match it to the bullets recovered from Morgan's body due to the severe deformation of the fragments, they also couldn't rule it out as the weapon used to kill her. On November 4, 2020, exactly 1 week after Morgan's murder, Jason McDermitt was arrested at his parents' home on Whipple Avenue Southwest in Canton, Ohio. His bond was set at $2 million. Given the severity of the charges and the strength of the evidence against him, McDermitt remained in custody. On December 17, 2020, a Stark County grand jury indicted Jason McDermitt on multiple charges: aggravated murder with a firearm specification and menacing by stalking. The case was assigned to Judge Natalie Haupt in the Stark County Court of Common Pleas. The trial of Jason Allen McDermitt began on April 2, 2021, nearly 6 months after Morgan's murder. The prosecution team consisted of Stark County Prosecuting Attorney Kyle Stone and Assistant Prosecuting Attorney Lisa Neames. McDermitt was represented by defense attorney Ty Graham. The prosecution built their case methodically, calling witness after witness to establish McDermitt's obsession with Morgan, his stalking behavior, his access to firearms, and his presence near the crime scene during the murder. Coworkers testified about McDermitt's constant talk about Morgan. They described how he showed them photos of Morgan and her daughter, how he became visibly depressed after Morgan cut contact with him, and how he repeatedly asked them to intervene on his behalf to convince Morgan to forgive him. They described reading an apology letter he had written to Morgan, begging for another chance. Most critically, they noted his dramatically different demeanor on the morning of October 28th. After weeks of appearing depressed, unkempt, and barely functional, McDermitt had arrived at work that morning suddenly happy and upbeat for the first time in weeks. Morgan's mother, Cindy Pappas, testified about McDermitt's bizarre behavior at a family birthday party back in August 2020, 2 months before the murder. She described how McDermitt had followed Morgan around during tours of the house and had even called Morgan's grandmother Grandma, as if he were already part of the family. Cindy also testified about receiving a phone call from Morgan in tears after the October 8th phone incident, describing how violated and betrayed Morgan felt. Jason Scarnecchia, Morgan's boyfriend, testified about discovering Morgan's body around 6:30 that morning and immediately calling 911. He testified that he had heard no gunshots during the night, which made sense given that Morgan was killed outside and he was inside the house asleep. He cooperated fully with the investigation, provided DNA samples, submitted to gunshot residue testing, and was quickly cleared. Detective Rocco Ross, who led the investigation, provided extensive testimony about the digital evidence. He walked the jury through the Skype conversations documenting McDermitt's sexual fantasies about Morgan. He showed them the secretly recorded photos and videos. He presented the traffic camera footage placing McDermitt's distinctive vehicle near the crime scene during the murder window and then traveling away shortly after. Deputy Eric Brown presented his crash reconstruction analysis, explaining in detail how the tire tracks at the scene matched the specifications of McDermitt's Ford Focus. The width, tread pattern, and wheelbase all corresponded exactly. One of McDermitt's own friends, Daniel Spence, testified that after the phone incident, McDermitt had expressed being upset with himself for betraying Morgan's trust. This testimony suggested McDermitt was aware he had done something wrong, yet he had continued trying to contact Morgan obsessively despite her clear rejection. Defense attorney Ty Graham faced an uphill battle. The evidence against his client was overwhelming. Graham argued that the case relied too heavily on circumstantial evidence. He pointed out that no murder weapon had been definitively, conclusively identified and linked to his client. He suggested that the investigation had targeted the wrong person from the beginning. Graham told the jury that Jason McDermitt was a young man who didn't cause trouble, who worked long hours, and then went home to sleep. He acknowledged that McDermitt had looked through Morgan's phone along with 2 other FedEx coworkers on October 8th, and that McDermitt had sent Fox an apology letter afterward. But Graham argued this didn't make him a murderer. In an attempt to cast doubt on the timeline, Graham questioned how Morgan's boyfriend, who was inside the house when she was killed, could not have heard 2 gunshots fired from less than 10 yards away. This argument ignored the fact that Scarnecchia was asleep inside the house. It was raining, and the shots were fired outside. Graham also emphasized that McDermitt had voluntarily provided police with his DNA, his car, his phone, and access to his parents' address without being asked. He characterized this cooperation as the behavior of an innocent man rather than a guilty one. Finally, Graham raised the issue of the firearms. He noted that McDermitt's father owned several guns, which were kept in a locked cabinet. Graham argued that McDermitt did not have regular access to these weapons. He also presented testimony from McDermitt's parents claiming their son had undergone wrist surgeries that would have made it difficult or impossible for him to fire a gun accurately. Notably, Jason McDermitt himself never took the stand. He provided no statement, no explanation, and no apology to Morgan's family. After hearing all the evidence and testimony, the jury deliberated for approximately 3 hours. On April 8, 2021, they returned with their verdict. Jason McDermitt was found guilty of aggravated murder with a firearm specification. He was also found guilty of menacing by stalking, though the jury did not find the trespassing element, reducing that charge from a 4th-degree felony to a 1st-degree misdemeanor. The conviction meant that McDermitt would face a mandatory sentence of life in prison. The only question remaining was whether Judge Haupt would allow the possibility of parole after a certain number of years, or whether she would impose life without the possibility of parole. The sentencing hearing took place on April 14, 2021. Before Judge Natalie Haupt imposed sentence, members of Morgan's family were given the opportunity to address the court and speak directly to the man who had murdered their loved one. The most powerful and heartbreaking statement came from Amelia, Morgan's daughter. The little girl, who was now between 8 and 10 years old, had written a letter to read in court. Standing before the man who had killed her mother, Amelia's words cut through the courtroom. "I wish she could see me graduate from high school," Amelia said, her voice steady despite her young age. "I wish she could see me get married, but you made it so she can't do any of these things. I thought monsters weren't real, but you proved me wrong. You hurt so many people. You hurt me and the people I love. You ruined your own life because of how much of a bad person you are." The courtroom was silent as this child confronted her mother's killer with a clarity and strength that many adults would struggle to find. Morgan's father, Robert Fox, also addressed McDermitt. "I'll never get my daughter back," he said, his voice breaking with grief and rage. "I miss her so much. I love her so much, and I am going to struggle for the rest of my life. So may you do the same. May you rot in hell, Jason McDermitt." After hearing from Morgan's family, Judge Natalie Haupt delivered her sentence. She sentenced Jason McDermitt to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the aggravated murder conviction. She added 3 years for the firearm specification to be served prior to and consecutive to the life sentence. She imposed 180 days for the menacing by stalking conviction to be served concurrently. In explaining her decision to deny any possibility of parole, Judge Haupt stated, "While you are young and have no prior criminal history, I do believe that there is a risk you will commit another offense, and there is a need to protect the public." She cited the premeditation evident in his actions, the stalking behavior, the obsession, and most damningly, his complete lack of remorse. McDermitt had never apologized. He had never shown any recognition of the pain he had caused. He had never acknowledged his guilt. Jason McDermitt was remanded to the custody of the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction. He was eventually transferred to Noble Correctional Institution in Caldwell, Ohio, a medium-security facility where he remains incarcerated today. McDermitt's defense team filed an appeal, raising 6 different assignments of error in the case. They argued that the conviction should be overturned for various legal reasons. On July 14, 2022, more than a year after the conviction, the Ohio 5th District Court of Appeals issued their decision in the case of State v. McDermitt. The appellate court reviewed each of McDermitt's arguments carefully. They examined the evidence, the trial proceedings, and the legal issues raised. In the end, they affirmed the conviction on all counts. The appellate judges found no reversible error in the trial. Jason McDermitt's conviction and sentence were upheld. As of 2025, Jason McDermitt remains in prison serving his life sentence without the possibility of parole. He is now 33 years old. He maintains his innocence despite the overwhelming evidence against him. While the criminal case brought some measure of justice, Morgan's family believed that FedEx bore significant responsibility for her death. They filed a wrongful death lawsuit against FedEx Ground, alleging that the company had failed to protect Morgan from workplace harassment despite her explicit complaints. The lawsuit made several key allegations. First, it argued that FedEx had failed to take appropriate action when Morgan reported the October 8 phone incident to Human Resources. Second, it pointed to the earlier complaint about McDermitt from another female employee who had described his friendship as turning obsessive. This complaint had been documented in McDermitt's personnel file, yet FedEx had apparently taken no meaningful action to address the pattern of behavior. Third, the lawsuit alleged that FedEx had failed to create a safe work environment for Morgan. Despite her reports that she felt targeted and uncomfortable at work, despite her documented complaints about McDermitt's behavior, FedEx had allowed McDermitt to continue working at the same facility as Morgan with apparently no restrictions or supervision. 1 year after Morgan's murder, in October 2021, Morgan's family and friends held a peaceful protest outside FedEx Ground's Jackson Township facility. Morgan's mother, Cindy Pappas, delivered a pointed message to the company. "We're here simply to let FedEx Ground know that bullying and harassment have no place in a working environment, and if management had done their job correctly, my daughter would still be alive." The words were harsh, but the family believed they were true. If FedEx had taken Morgan's complaint seriously, if they had separated McDermitt from Morgan or terminated him based on the pattern of obsessive behavior toward female employees, Morgan might still be alive today. If you're finding this story both tragic and compelling, this is a good time to leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Do you think companies have a responsibility to protect employees from coworkers who display obsessive or stalking behavior? What measures should workplaces implement when an employee reports feeling unsafe? Your perspective matters, so please share it in the comments below. The civil case against FedEx was eventually resolved through a settlement agreement. The settlement was finalized in December 2022 and publicly announced on February 9, 2023, through filings in Stark County Probate Court overseen by probate Judge Dixie Park. The total settlement amount was $4 million. This substantial sum was divided among Morgan's survivors according to a carefully structured plan. Approximately $2 million was placed into a trust and structured account specifically for Morgan's daughter, Amelia. This money would be managed to provide for Amelia's future needs and ensure she could experience the opportunities her mother would have wanted for her. The estate attorneys handling the case, from the law firm Placas Manos, specifically attorney Elizabeth Jackson, received $1,300,000 for their representation of the estate. The remaining $650,000 was split among 6 members of the Fox family, including Morgan's parents. Court filings described the purpose of Amelia's trust in touching terms. The settlement would allow Morgan's daughter to continue participating in golf lessons, something she had been doing with her mother. It would provide for her to attend an exceptional college when the time came, and it would ensure she could have a beautiful wedding someday, with her mother's memory honored even in her absence. The estate attorneys requested that Judge Dixie Park seal the settlement details, citing concerns that people with bad intentions might try to take advantage of a child with a substantial trust fund. However, the judge declined to seal the records, citing Ohio's public records laws that presume transparency in legal proceedings. FedEx issued a brief official statement through their external senior communications specialist, Allie Adams. "We continue to mourn the loss of our team member, Morgan Fox, and our thoughts remain with her family at this time. The family has reached a resolution with FedEx Ground, of which the terms are confidential." While the settlement terms were technically confidential according to the agreement between the parties, the public court filings revealed the essential details anyway. No amount of money could bring Morgan back or heal the wound her loss created in the lives of those who loved her. But her family was determined that some good would come from this tragedy. In 2022, they established the Morgan Ashlye Fox Foundation. The foundation's mission is to provide bereavement support to families with young children who have been impacted by violence. The organization offers counseling services, support groups, and resources to help children process grief and trauma. It's sponsored by the Placas Manos law firm that represented the estate in the civil case against FedEx. Through this foundation, Morgan's memory lives on in a meaningful way. Every child who receives support, every family that finds comfort through the foundation's work, is a testament to the love Morgan had for her own daughter and her desire to help others. Morgan Fox's murder highlights several critical issues that deserve serious attention. First, It demonstrates the lethal danger of obsessive behavior and stalking. Jason McDermitt's fixation on Morgan escalated over months, from inappropriate workplace behavior to secret surveillance to ultimately murder. The warning signs were there: the complaint from another female coworker, the phone incident, the constant contact attempts after Morgan cut him off. Second, the case raises important questions about workplace safety and employer responsibility. FedEx had documented evidence of McDermitt's pattern of obsessive behavior toward female coworkers. They knew about the phone incident. They knew Morgan felt targeted and uncomfortable. Yet they allowed McDermitt to continue working in close proximity to Morgan with apparently no intervention or protection for her. Third, the case showcases the power of digital evidence in modern criminal investigations. Without the traffic camera footage, the GPS data, the forensic analysis of McDermitt's phone revealing thousands of secret photos and disturbing Skype conversations, this case might have been much harder to solve. Digital footprints that people think they've erased can often be recovered and can provide crucial evidence. Fourth, the case demonstrates that when someone shows you who they are through their actions, you should believe them. Morgan recognized that McDermitt's violation of her privacy on October 8th revealed something deeply wrong about his character and his feelings toward her. She cut him out of her life completely. She reported his behavior. She did everything right. But the systems that should have protected her failed. Jason McDermitt remains incarcerated at Noble Correctional Institution in Caldwell, Ohio. He is now 33 years old, serving a sentence of life without the possibility of parole. His appeals have been exhausted, and he will spend the rest of his life behind bars. Morgan's daughter, Amelia, is now a teenager. She is growing up without her mother, supported by the trust fund from the FedEx settlement, and surrounded by her extended family who love her. The Ashlye Fox Foundation continues its work helping other children who have suffered similar losses. Morgan's family continues to advocate for workplace safety and for taking stalking behavior seriously. Cindy Pappas has spoken publicly about the need for companies to act decisively when employees report feeling unsafe, rather than waiting until tragedy strikes. The case has been featured on multiple true crime television shows, including Investigation Discovery's Caught in the Net and Oxygen's Killer Relationship with Faith Jenkins. These programs have helped raise awareness about the dangers of workplace stalking and obsessive behavior. Ashlye Fox was 29 years old when her life was stolen from her. She was a dedicated mother, a hard-working operations manager, and a beloved daughter, sister, and friend. She had her whole life ahead of her. She had plans and dreams for herself and for her daughter. Jason McDermitt took all of that away because he couldn't accept that Morgan didn't want a relationship with him. His obsession, his entitlement, his refusal to accept her rejection led him to commit an act of unspeakable violence. He ambushed her in her own driveway in the early morning darkness and shot her twice in the head as she prepared to go to work. The investigation that followed was thorough and professional. Detectives followed the digital breadcrumbs McDermitt left behind. The traffic cameras that captured his car, the GPS data from his phone, the thousands of secret photos and videos documenting his obsession, the tire tracks that matched his vehicle, the gunshot residue in his car, the car wash surveillance showing his attempt to destroy evidence. The prosecution at trial presented overwhelming evidence of McDermitt's guilt. The jury deliberated for just 3 hours before convicting him. Judge Natalie Hoppt sentenced him to life without parole, ensuring he would never have the opportunity to harm another woman. The civil case against FedEx resulted in a $4 million settlement that will help provide for Morgan's daughter's future. But no amount of money can replace a mother's love, a mother's guidance, a mother's presence at life's important moments. Before we close, if this video has given you insight into how digital evidence solves modern crimes, or if you appreciate the detailed research that goes into these cases, please take a moment to hit that like button. It really helps support the channel and allows us to continue bringing you these important stories. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Buried Secret Media and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. We cover cases that deserve to be remembered, victims who deserve justice, and investigations that show how far we've come in solving crimes through technology. Thank you for watching this investigation into the murder of Ashlye Fox. Her story is a tragic reminder of the very real dangers of obsessive behavior and stalking, and the critical importance of taking such behavior seriously before it escalates to violence. Morgan's memory lives on through her daughter, through the foundation established in her name, and through the awareness her case has raised about workplace safety and the need to protect people from those who refuse to accept rejection. Rest in peace, Morgan Ashlye Fox. Your daughter will grow up knowing how much you loved her, how hard you worked to provide for her, and how your legacy continues to help other families facing similar tragedies.